Thank you for joining me tonight. And we're going to cover a couple different things. The first few should hopefully be a review. So we're going to go over theme and character kind of quickly, but and then we're really going to spend some time with point of view as well. I have a video I made on this awesome tool called Powtoon for you. And we're going to look at examples of the point of view, and then after we're all done going over the theme statements, character growth, and then our point of views, I'm actually going to look at one of the activities that students struggle with, which is its theme, character, and point of view, and help you see if you can kind of come up with some answers. I know a lot of you are going to be here for the punch card, so remember you're supposed to participate and try to answer questions if you can. I will be pausing it several times to answer any questions that you have about other assignments, and I can help you with anything that you have questions about across any of the English courses. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is talk about theme statements. And then we'll talk about character growth. And before I start the video, I'll pause my first time to see if you have any questions about other assignments. If at any time you have a question about what I'm covering tonight, please pop in and ask on the chat, or you're more than welcome to grab the mic and talk as well. But I know the chat's a little bit easier sometimes. Okay, so theme statements. A lot of times we just hear theme as, okay, can you go find the theme? And what ends up happening is students find a big topic, but they don't really find the theme. So we're going to talk about what I try to say theme statements as much as possible instead of just the theme, though I do slip, because if we have to state the theme as a statement, which means it's several words together, sometimes a full sentence, it helps us actually capture the full theme. So let me move this way. Theme needs to be a statement. It helps you avoid just listing that topic. So a lot of times, like To Kill a Mockingbird is a book I read in my brick and mortar class. So when I'm in a classroom and we read this really big book, they're like, oh, it's about racism or about hate. But that's just the topic, which is different than a theme. So just saying love or hate or racism doesn't, it kind of narrows it down. It is a big filter, but it's still way too broad. So what we want to do is write it as a statement. And how we do that is we ask ourselves, how does the author treat that topic? So if To Kill a Mockingbird is about racism, how does the author treat that topic? And if you can answer that, normally when we say how, we answer it in a much longer statement, not just one word, we'll end up with a much better idea of what the theme is. So the bulleted items are actually very famous. I just kind of randomly threw out some themes that you can state for 3 very famous stories, some of them very classic and some of them more modern. So unchecked youthful love is blind and dangerous. Would you like to try to guess what that is? That one might be a little bit harder depending on if you've read the story. If it helps, it's Shakespeare. So this is for Romeo and Juliet, and because they kill themselves at the end, and that is a very dangerous situation. And so they're very youthful and very absorbed in themselves at that moment and in their love, and so it kind of goes unchecked. So it can be very blind and very dangerous. Hate leads to injustice. There's a lot of books out there that this one could be, but I actually mentioned it a few minutes ago with To Kill a Mockingbird. Because of racism and hate, a town wrongly convicts an African-American man of a horrendous crime, even though there's obvious evidence that he did not do it. And so this is a great theme for that, because hate leads to injustice. There are many more themes, and I'm going to mention or talk about how we can have several themes in one novel, and I'll do that at the end. There's some other themes in To Kill a Mockingbird as well. And then sacrifice is the greatest power. At the very end of Harry Potter, when he sacrifices himself and is willing to die for the betterment of, he puts himself at risk and shows up to face Voldemort knowing or assuming he's going to die, that is a huge sacrifice, and it leads to him having great power, and it actually leads to others having great power and the hope and the willingness to fight after that to defeat Voldemort. So sacrifice is the greatest power would be a theme you could find in Harry Potter. So Harry Potter and actually all of these stories, all great stories have more than one theme. They'll have a primary theme generally, but To Kill a Mockingbird also has to do with acceptance and understanding other people's perspective. Literally in the story, it's Scout, the main character, learns to stand in someone else's shoes and understand their perspective. So it has to do with like empathy. So as a theme statement, you might say that a major part of growing up is learning to see other people's perspectives. In Harry Potter, you have the importance of friendship. Friendship stands by each other no matter what. Or bravery is needed in the face of great evil. That would be another theme. I could probably go all day on themes of Harry Potter because I tend to be a Potterhead, but I will leave it at that because I want to move on. Before I do you have any questions about theme statements? I'm going to take that as a no. It would help if you could, if you are here and listening, in your like chat box or on your one of your like, there's actually little like yes and no's that you can choose. If even just clicking those really helps move us along. If you could do that, that would be awesome. I don't want to move forward if you have any questions and are just typing it out. But if you're ready to move on, when I ask if there's no more questions, if you could click no, that would be fantastic. All right, so I am going to move on from this one, and we're going to talk about character growth. I don't want to just say character because there's a lot of things to do with character. And what that means is we can look at how we learn about the character. We learn about them through what they say, what they do, what other people say about them, what they look like. Those are indirect and direct characterizations. We can learn about a character based on whether or not they're round or flat. And that just means we don't get a lot of information about flat characters, and we have a ton of information about round characters. I like to describe flat characters as comic book characters. They're just very like they're two-dimensional, they're down on the paper, and we really aren't able to walk around them and understand what they truly are like we would a person in front of us. And so round characters, we're able to walk around them, so to speak, not in reality, but we understand so much more about them than just that like one or two dimensions of their character. But we're going to specifically today talk about character growth. And if they grow or don't grow means that they are going to be either static or dynamic. So these are very important words when we start talking about literary terms. If a character is static or if they are dynamic kind of tells us a lot about how involved they are in the story. Characters need to grow generally, excuse me, pardon me. To be dynamic, they must change and grow. And most of our to be a hero of a story, or excuse me, hero is probably not the right term, but we could say to be the protagonist in a story, they must experience some kind of growth. And so dynamic characters, it's really important to understand that they have to change. However, static characters are static. They just stay the same. So that means they're the opposite of dynamic. They don't change. They don't experience anything that they learn. They don't grow from an experience. They do not change the way they behave, the way they think, the things that they do or they say, or even visually. Sometimes when characters change and learn something emotionally or mentally or intellectually, they'll actually go through a physical change as well in some literary stories. But so static characters remain the same, and they tend to be the lesser characters in large stories. They can be the main character in short stories. But we have like Filch in Harry Potter. He's the like creepy kind of hangs in the background janitor character in Harry Potter, and he doesn't really change. He loves getting the kids in trouble. He doesn't really like kids, and he has his cat, and he's grumpy all the time. And that is his character, and it stays the same throughout the entire story. But dynamic characters have to change. So we have a lot of dynamic characters in Harry Potter. You actually can look at Harry, obviously, as dynamic. In many ways, you have Dumbledore is dynamic. He changes. Snape is definitely dynamic. Hermione has to learn lessons through the story. She is dynamic. Ron definitely grows up and becomes more mature and responsible, and he is dynamic. So there are a lot of dynamic characters in really, really big stories. A lot of times there's only 2 or 3 dynamic characters in a novel, and really probably only 1, sometimes 2 in a short story. So again, if you look at what the meanings of the words mean, you should remember if the character grows or not. And if they do not grow, it means they remain the same and they are static. If they do grow, it means they're dynamic. They have changed in at least one way. They grow from an experience and they learn something new. Do we have any questions for this element? Because this is really important, but if you can remember what static and what dynamic mean, which static means not to change and dynamic means to change, I think you will be able to remember what this is. Okay, I'm now going to move to point of view, but before I do that, I did promise that if you had questions about any specific assignments and wanted to ask them, that we'd pause before my video and I'd let you ask those questions. So do you have any questions about other assignments that you might be struggling with or need help with? Okay, so I need to actually get out my PowerPoint to run my little POW tune for you. So give me just a second to do that. I need to move a couple things real quick. All right, we're gonna stretch this out. I believe you should be able to hear the music as well, since it should be showing up or kind of happening on my microphone as well. So the music's not a huge deal. But it does make it a little bit more entertaining. So here we go. Okay, so we watched it once. I'm going to have you watch it one more time, and I want you to be able to tell me. I'm going to ask a couple questions, and remember to earn full time on your punch card. You have to participate a little bit. So watch a couple, we'll watch the video and jot down well, try to remember everything, but I'm going to ask a couple questions and then see what you can give an answer to, okay? Again, you can answer privately, so it's just between you and me. We're good to go there, all right? So I'm going to play the video, hopefully one more time. Oh, Awesome. Okay. So, let me pull back up my PowerPoint really quick. What was, for a question really quick, and you could just answer 1, 2, or 3, and that would be for first person point of view, second person point of view, and hi, Vanessa. I actually might go back and play the video. I'm hoping, since you're just jumping in, I am just starting going over the point of view. And so we are watching a video. You are not too late. Thank you for joining us. I believe you're good to go. We just went over a couple items, and I'm going to briefly review them. So the first thing we went over, and I'm not going to go backwards on the PowerPoint, but I can spend some time at the end of class or end of the session going back over them. But we talked about theme statements, and instead of just giving a topic like To Kill a Mockingbird, instead of just saying it's about hate or racism, you could make a statement by answering like, what is the author trying to say about the topic? And if you answer that question, it'll be something like, racism causes huge injustice in the world or in society. And so that statement is a much better and clearer idea on what the theme is. So you always want to use theme statements when you are determining theme. The second thing we talked about already tonight, but I did so very briefly, was character growth. And there are two literary terms that relate to character growth specifically. They're static and dynamic. Sorry, my brain kind of just paused there for a second. So, and if you think about what those words mean just by themselves, I think you'll remember what they mean for character growth. Static means they do not change. It just stays the same. So, and then dynamic means that they change. Something moves along either emotionally or mentally and that kind of thing. All right. I did play the video, but I'm going to play it one more time for you since you just hopped in, because it literally just stopped. It's only like 1.5 minutes long. It's going to be talking about point of view. And I made this video earlier. I love Powtoons. They're super fun way to kind of give you information. I am going to ask some questions on the chat. So, and just to remind everybody here that the participation is a big part of getting your punch card for the, like your punch on your punch card for your excused assignments, okay? So let's play it one more time. And it's going to go over all three kinds of point of view, okay? I have to get out of my PowerPoint really quick again, just to get over to my video that I played. Okay, I know that's a little fast and furious, but I think it's fun to see that rather than just hear the teacher blabber on sometimes. So what I'm going to have you do, if you can either do so, you guys are welcome. I really love Powtoons. They're tons of fun and they're just different and a different way to see things. So, but what I'd love you to do, you can do so privately or you can do it to everyone. I'm going to ask you questions and all you have to do is put in 1, 2, or 3 for first person, second person, or third person. The blackout part, and I don't know why it keeps blacking out on the video, but that's all it says is the 3 kinds of point of view, which were first person, second person, and third person. So all you got to do is a 1, 2, or 3 for my questions. So which point of view uses I, me, or my? Perfect. Good job. I'm waiting for one more response. Okay. So the next one is, which one has, yeah, we're good, Vanessa. Thank you. The next one is, the other part is, or excuse me, my next question is, which one has 2 types? One of them, or they're called omniscient and limited. So, good job. It is third person. And we're actually going to go over those a little bit more in just a couple minutes because they're the most commonly used points of view. So I broke my video up into PowerPoint too, but I thought this was a great way to introduce it. And then, which one's the hardest to pull off? In fact, the second is the hardest to pull off, so good job, Vanessa, because you have to, like, the writer has to manage to write as if they are the reader and make the reader actually believe that they're going along with this ride kind of in the story. So then let's do which one tells, we'll do two more questions. Which point of view is inside one person's head, only in one person's head, and so we know them very well, and it generally is the narrator, obviously, of the story. Okay, so if they would use I, me, or my because they're talking as if it's coming out of their head, if that makes sense, Vanessa. So yeah, we might know one person really well in the third person, but we're also going to get pieces or a lot of pieces in third person from other characters in the story because they can kind of go over it. So I'm actually going to break this down. Those are my questions. So good job and thank you. Oh, we don't want that. Stop. Sorry about that. Many days I'm really good with the tech and sometimes I'm a little glitchy. So I'm actually going to, I have the images, the most important images from, or I felt were the most important images from my video. And we're going to kind of review them, but I have examples from famous stories, some popular culture stories, and some classical literature just to kind of demonstrate what the point of view will look like. I think that will really help you guys recognize it in your stories. So the point of view is really, you just almost want to think of point of view as a camera. And where is that camera located? On first person, it's essentially like the eyeballs of the narrator. The person who's actually telling us the story is going along with the story, and we only know what's going on with that single person. We do learn maybe about other characters, but it's only the perspective of the person with the glasses on or holding the camera, that singular person, and that's why they use I, me, or my. But if we're going to maybe do like omniscient, or not omniscient, excuse me, third person, it's more like the camera, you know, if you've ever seen like sets of a movie or something where the cameras fly overhead, that's more of like your third person, because they're going to fly overhead, land down on one person, jump back up, go to the next person, and sometimes the camera gets closer to other people than they do to different characters. So we might get up close and personal with one character, but we might get semi-close and we know who they are and we get their feelings about things, but we're not necessarily super tight to them, if that makes sense. So think of it like a camera. If you are second person, you're kind of, second person is really hard. A lot of times it's why you won't see high school classes teaching it, and it doesn't occur very often because it's so difficult to pull off. But it's that concept that the reader is experiencing the story. So you're almost kind of like inside their body, not just looking at it through their eyes and in their head, but like they're being pushed by an unknown force going one way or the other. And so we're going to look at each one separately right now, but I wanted you to think of your point of view just like pointing your camera. Where are you looking at it, and how close is that camera to the person that they're describing? Okay. All right. So let's go to first person. First person in the dead giveaway is the idea that it's using that I, me, my house, that is mine. I did this. I went there, she did this to me. It's all like super tight into that, into the narrator of the story. And it's really kind of cool because you get inside their head and you really understand where that character is going. But then at the same time, we don't get anywhere near the other characters. All of the descriptions are only coming from how our narrator perceives them or sees those characters. So the examples I have for you on this one, this is probably one of the most popular one right now. Well, not right now, but just the most current. But The Hunger Games is definitely told in a first person point of view. And this is the very famous scene where she volunteers to become tribute. And I've highlighted, I think I highlighted all of, but I tried to highlight all of the references to me, myself, I, and my. And so we are definitely with Katniss here. And the story focuses on Katniss's feelings and what she's experiencing. Okay? So this is a great example. Another really famous literary example would be To Kill a Mockingbird. I know I use that one a lot, but it's one of my favorite literary books because I love the character of Scout. And she's our narrator. She's a 6-year-old in a really adult world and in adult situations. And how she understands what's going on is wonderful, but we wouldn't have the same story if the narrator was Atticus, which is her father and the adult and the lawyer in the story. Instead, we see through somewhat innocent eyes, and we're able to see kind of how wrong what's going on in her community is, because everything we see is through Scout's eyes. But we also see how much she doesn't understand about the adult world, because Harper Lee, who is the author, sticks really close inside Scout's head and we only see Scout through her perspective, and we only see the world through Scout's perspective. So that's a first person point of view. So then the dreaded second person, not dreaded. I actually find this, just a second, sorry. My daughter just got home. So, but second person is difficult. I have an example for you though. And it's really cool when they successfully pull it off because it's a different experience as a reader. So second person is told in the voice of the onlooker, which is you, the reader. So it's like, and that's why it's hard to do, because as an author, how do you know how your reader is going to think, right? And so to successfully pull it off, it needs to be just general enough that anybody can kind of jump into the skin and do it. In a way, second person's like body snatchers. They just kind of jump into one place and you live through their story and you kind of just experience it as if you were there, which is different than hearing from the first person point of view, because it's as if you sat down with the person and heard their story, where second person is as if you're in the person kind of and going through the story with them. That's the best way I can kind of give you, as they're more, this is like the body snatcher version of the power point of view. So one of the more famous ones that was successful is called Bright Lights, Big City by Jay McInerney. I'm really bad with names, but what's really cool about this, when used correctly, the second person point of view makes the reader an active participant in the story instead of a bystander. Which these next few point of view examples, this is the one I'm going to give you. I found this from a really great website, and I need to probably find, I still have it open. So you have friends who actually care about you and speak the language of the inner self. This is a quote from Bright Lights in Big Cities. You have avoided them of late. Your soul is as disheveled as your apartment, and until you can clean it up a little, you don't want to clean it up a little, you don't want to invite anyone inside. So it's the you point of view. It literally is going to say you throughout the whole thing. Okay? All right. So any questions on second person point of view before I go over the one that's probably the most popular and most often used. Third person is such a big point of view. It's used probably the most in all literature. It is that camera just is like kind of floating above everybody and moving from place to place. And sometimes it sticks to one person a little bit more than the others. And sometimes it will stay way above everybody and not really get close to anybody. So it kind of just depends on the way that the author wants to tell the story. Now, the other thing is third person is interesting because it can actually get inside people's heads and like head hop. So we might learn about Harry Potter really, really well because we're inside Harry Potter's head for a while. Then we might learn about Hermione because we jump over to Hermione for a while, go over to Ron. All these different characters, they're not maybe not inside their head, but they're right. The camera's right over the top of them. A lot of times in mini stories, they'll actually like flip narrators. Right now, I'm teaching Wonder, which is a fantastic book. There's a movie out about it recently too, but it literally changes point of view. Oh, I totally love that book too, Vanessa. I don't just love it for its content, which is fantastic because it's not just about bullying, but it's very much about accepting yourself too, which I find fantastic. But it is definitely a number one. It is first person, but the really cool part is, and I love stories that do this, we jump from different first person perspectives, right? But in some ways that makes it third person as well because it's jumping around and we have a different narrator. But it is definitely first person because we get the I, me, my's from each character, but in a tricky way, the author's kind of overlaying that third person, if that makes sense, because we're now getting to see everybody's perspective and not just the one person's, because I don't think the story would be the same if we only heard Augie's point of view. And so I love the way authors use point of view is a really, they can tweak it, they can play with it, and the more they play with it sometimes, the better the story is because it really engages the reader because it's different. So third person, you do want to think about it like that floating camera and know that we can have our close-ups and we can have our like distant shots, right? And when we know everything and we know all, see all, that means we are omniscient. Omniscient is to kind of be godly in a way, which means you know all and you see all in this aspect. So that means that they know the emotions and what people are thinking about and what they're doing, not just maybe in one location, but over in a different city. They can jump around and they know all and see all. But the limited is more where it only tells what they know and feel. So what the narrator only knows and feels, even though we might get the bigger scope of the story, we're not getting the emotions and the feelings of all characters. We're mostly sticking to that one. So that means we might hear a lot of the story from all, like the broad spectrum of the story, and we see what other people are doing, but we really only know the emotions and the feelings. We're only really inside one person's head, but then we kind of hop around from a distance to see the rest of the story. And that's why it's limited. It's limited to knowing one person's feelings. Though we might see the actions of other people as well, we're just not knowing what they feel. Okay, so I hope that kind of helps, and it makes sense. Omniscient means you're everywhere and all over and know everything. But then limited means we know the whole story, but we're sticking to one person for the feelings. Okay? All right, and examples of third person. And the first one is going to actually be, so this first one is our omniscient point of view. Because I kind of wanted you, they are very different. Well, they're very similar, but they're also different. And so Lord of the Flies is very much omniscient. It floats around all over the place. So one of the examples, and we see the feelings of Ralph in this first quote from Golding, which is the author of Lord of the Flies. Ralph disentangled himself cautiously and stole away through the branches. In a few seconds, the fat boy's grunts were behind him, and he was hurrying toward the screen that still lay between him and the lagoon. So we know a lot of things by word choice here, but we're inside Ralph's head and his emotions. But then the narrator in The Lord of the Flies moves back and forth between the different scenes and the different thoughts. So in chapter 8, we're with Jack. So when we get Jack hunting, happy and wearing the damp darkness of the forest like his old clothes. If you know what Lord of the Flies is, there's several boys trying to survive on a mountain. I mean, not on a mountain, on an island. And they kind of have a major struggle for power. So Jack is out hunting happily, wearing the damp darkness of the forest like his old clothes. But Simon is watching the flies swarm black and iridescent green on the pig's head. And then the third character, and then Piggy, flushing pinkly with pride when he understands that Jack is accepting him. All three different characters, they're in three different places on the island, and yet we know what they're feeling, where they're at, and what they're doing. That is omniscient. We know all, right? So then, if we look at the next one, we're going to look at some very famous and very opposing, but I think it's important to see different stories. You never know, maybe you'll like one of the concepts and look up the book. Harry Potter is on the left here in the blue, and Harry is that limited third person, because we know more about Harry than any of the other characters, yet we know about the other characters and what's going on in other places. So this is a quote where we see that it is third person limited. Something very painful was going on in Harry's mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, he saw again the blinding flash of green light, more clearly than he had ever remembered it before, and he remembered something else for the first time in his life, a high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching him sadly. If this was first person and we were only in Harry's head, which we aren't in the story, if this was first person, it would say something very painful was going on in my mind. As Hagrid's story came to a close, I saw again the blinding flash of green light more clearly than I had ever remembered it before. And I remembered something else for the first time in my life, a high, cold, cruel laugh. Hagrid was watching me sadly. That changes just by changing the pronoun there. It changes this more about Harry, and really the theme of Harry Potter are about family and what it means to be family and friendship and kind of working for the good, like the good of all, right? And so that's a group effort. So it wouldn't work to be first person. And though I think it does kind of go a little bit, like it is definitely limited, we get a heavy lean towards omniscient because we know a lot about the other characters as well, and we even get how they're feeling a little bit, but it's not as tight as it is to Harry. So it's really limited to Harry. So that's why they consider Harry Potter limited third person. If I don't know your reading interests, but 1984 is intense and kind of heavy reading, but it is really interesting if you're into political reading. So in its second minute, the hate rose to a frenzy. People were leaping up and down in their places and shouting at the tops of their voices in an effort to drown the maddening, bleating voice that came from the screen. Oops. The little sandy-haired woman had turned bright pink, and her mouth was opening and shutting like that of a landed fish. So that's the crowd. And then even O'Brien's heavy face flushed. That gets a little closer to O'Brien. He was sitting very straight in his chair, his powerful chest swelling and quivering. And I can't see the rest of it the way my screen showed up. So let me see if I can read it real quick to you, because I don't know if it's showing up on your screen. Powerful chest swelling and quivering as though he were standing up to the assault of a wave. So even though Vanessa, what do you mean? I just saw my chat blinks out when I click my screen. Can you? Oh, There you go. No, it's not showing. Yes, I wanted to get here because I accidentally didn't realize that my text box was off the screen. So, but they were standing up to the assault of a wave. So what we see here is we have the crowd, but then we go close to O'Brien, so that's limited. All right. So those are our three types of points of view. Do you guys have any questions about looking at them closer? If you have any, I'm hoping that breaking it down that way kind of helped you understand point of view in a more clean way, in a more thorough way. So, okay, the nice thing about first person is that you're only going to have, if I'm going to go back to the Harry Potter, just because I think that'll actually weirdly enough demonstrate it. If you look at the Harry Potter quote, there's nothing in here that says I, right? So so you're talking more about, so Vanessa, it's more for you writing your own point of view, like using the I's or the my's in your own writing that you're worried about? Okay, so before I answer that question, or talk to you about that, because I was about to pause and talk about other assignments, let me just finish. When you're reading, the clue is that the narrator, you're inside one person's head, and then you have the I's and the my's and the me's, okay? So when you're reading, look for those. When you're talking about writing yourself, are you writing creatively, or do you mean like with your essays and such? Okay, here's the, I guess, it's really hard to step away from the I, because, and it depends, like there is an assignment in 10th grade English where you have to give your perspective and your argument on something. And it's okay to use I. It's still better to try to avoid it, but it is okay to use I. If they ask you for your opinion, or they're asking you for like your favorite something, or to define something, or anything like that, then what you want to do is you can use the I's. So, but if they're going to ask you, like there's another assignment in the 10th grade English that asks you to talk about an organization, and you want to avoid, using any I's or me's or my's if you're like talking about something else. You know what I mean? You're not talking about your opinion, and you're not talking about your feelings about something, or your favorite something, or telling a story about yourself. Then what you want to do is make sure you avoid the I's and the me's and the my's. That's more academic when you're like writing informational. But when you are like, I think it might be 10th grade or 9th grade, there's the best gift you've ever received. You definitely want to use the I's and the me's and the my in there, because you're telling a story about yourself. If you are writing that academic essay, you almost want to just cut it out altogether. And the reason I say that, Vanessa, since that's one of your concerns, is the more you don't include the I, the more academic and more elevated your writing goes, because you're forced to be more creative. Okay? I hope that makes sense with that. Okay? Awesome. Okay. So, Daryl, I'm glad. So are you talking about Wonder? I just saw your question. I loved Wonder. I'm still like, I love teaching it. It's my favorite thing, and I will teach it. I actually work during the day at a class where I work with 5th graders, and I work with high schoolers, and every grade level reads it because I really like it. But I actually like every one of the books I presented in the lesson today are some of my favorite stories. So I like, obviously, to read, so I like lots of types of stories. But I'd love to know which book, Daryl, that you were talking about. And I hope I'm saying your name right. Okay. So one of the things that I want to do really quick, oh, it's 6:53 already. So is where this is the assignment in English 9. Are you guys in English 9 or English 10? Or maybe neither, honestly. If you can you're in, okay. So, oh, I helped write English. Okay. So, I'm trying to think. We do ask theme questions in English 11. So I'm actually going to skip this part, because neither of you are in the class that this is for, even though actually maybe I'm not going to. I do have a couple minutes. So I really want to kind of see if we can review everything I talked about today, if that makes sense. It's a good way to end, I think, the evening, so to speak. So this is an Aesop fable. One of the things you'll find is The Fox and the Grapes. It's a very famous story, but it's told in a lot of different ways, okay? So it's called The Fox and the Grapes. And what I want you to do is try to determine the theme. Hint, it tells you what the theme is. And then number 2, what you think the point of view is. And then if you think the character grows, okay? So if it's static or if it is dynamic. So one afternoon, a fox was walking through the forest and spotted a bunch of grapes hanging from over a lofty branch. Just the thing to quench my thirst, he said he. Taking a few steps back, the fox jumped and just missed the hanging grapes. Again, the fox took a few steps back, ran, jumped, and tried to reach them, but still failed. Finally giving up, the fox turned up his nose and said, "They're probably sour anyway," and proceeded to walk away. It is easy to despise what you cannot have. So, which bullet number? We're going to say this is 1. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullet numbers. Just give me a number. Which bullet number do you think the theme is? Because it actually, fables tend to state the theme towards the end. Correct, Vanessa. Good job. Okay, so it is easy to despise what you cannot have. Now here's the other parts. Do you think that which perspective, first, second, or third, do you think this would be stated in? Awesome. Correct. Okay, so Vanessa, it is third person. Can you also, if you could both answer me privately. So Vanessa, if you go down and choose the 2 part, could you tell me, and you just choose me, so it's just between you and I, would you tell me if you think it is omniscient or limited? Just put O or L. That is correct, Vanessa. Daryl, can you tell me which one you would think it is? Okay, and then the last thing I want to do really quick, Vanessa, is can you tell me if it's static or dynamic? Definitely. Okay, so I don't think the fox doesn't change at all. We meet him and he tries, and he doesn't like try to be different at all. So I would definitely think he's static. So our time is up. I really appreciate that you were both here. I really do hope the videos and the conversation helped.